Imagine you're a prison guard finishing another routine shift. Visitors are leaving, families are saying goodbye, everything seems normal. Then just as one visitor approaches the exit gate, something feels off. The person is wearing a wig, glasses, a pink shirt, and appears to be a teenage girl. But hidden beneath that disguise is one of Brazil's most notorious prisoners, a man who believed he was only minutes away from freedom. This is the unbelievable true story of the prisoner who tried to escape prison dressed as his own daughter. Understand why this story became international news. We first need to understand the man behind the disguise. His name was Clauvino da Silva. Authorities linked him to one of Brazil's most dangerous criminal organizations. By 2019, he was serving time inside a high-security prison near Rio de Janeiro. Officials considered him a high-risk inmate, not because he was violent inside prison, but because they believed he would do almost anything to get out. And over time, that desire for freedom grew stronger. The prison was designed to keep dangerous inmates contained. Tall walls, guard towers, multiple checkpoints. Every movement was monitored. For most prisoners, escape was only a dream. But psychologists often note something important. The longer someone loses control over their life, the stronger their desire becomes to regain it. For some inmates, that means following the rules. For others, it means looking for opportunities. And somewhere inside those prison walls, an idea began to form. At first, the plan sounds ridiculous, almost impossible. How could a male prisoner walk out of a high-security prison without being recognized? The answer wasn't tunnels, it wasn't helicopters, and it wasn't violence. Instead, the plan relied on one of the oldest tricks in human history: deception. Authorities would later discover that the escape attempt centered around an unexpected person, his own daughter. And if the disguise worked, he could potentially leave prison disguised as a visitor, at least in theory. At first, the plan sounds ridiculous. What happened next shocked investigators. The disguise was surprisingly detailed: a wig, glasses, women's clothing, and perhaps most importantly, a realistic silicone mask designed to resemble a young girl. The goal wasn't perfection. The goal was simply to avoid raising suspicion long enough to reach the exit. But disguises don't just change appearance. They also require behavior. How someone walks, moves, speaks, and reacts under pressure. That would soon become a major problem. Came the day. Families arrived for visitation. Parents, children, relatives. The atmosphere seemed normal. Guards had seen countless visits before. Nothing appeared unusual. But hidden among the visitors was the person connected to the plan: his daughter. As the visit continued, time began running out. Every minute increased the risk. And somewhere inside the prison, a decision was about to be made. Would one of the most bizarre prison escape attempts in modern history actually work? Or was the entire plan about to collapse? As visitation continued, the prison remained busy. Guards watched entrances and exits. Families talked, laughed, and prepared to leave. On the surface, everything appeared normal. But behind the scenes, something extraordinary was happening. Clauvino da Silva began transforming himself. The disguise pieces came together one by one: a wig, glasses, clothing, a realistic mask. The goal wasn't to create a perfect copy. The goal was to blend in just enough to avoid attracting attention. Because sometimes people don't see what they expect to see. They see what they expect to find. And that psychological blind spot was exactly what the plan depended on. Eventually, the moment arrived. Visitors were preparing to leave. People moved toward the exits. Among them was a figure who appeared to be an ordinary teenage girl, at least from a distance. The disguised prisoner began moving through the prison. Each step brought him closer to freedom and closer to discovery. This wasn't a movie. There were no second chances. One suspicious glance could end everything. Yet somehow he kept moving forward. For a few moments, the impossible seemed possible. And something changed. Not an alarm, not a security camera, not a locked door. A feeling. One of the most powerful tools in security isn't technology, it's human intuition. Some guards began noticing small inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, just tiny details that didn't quite fit. body language, movement, behavior. The disguise could change appearance, but changing years of habits is much harder. And those small details started attracting attention. An investigation led to confrontation. Security personnel stopped the disguised visitor. Questions were asked. The atmosphere immediately changed. What had looked like an ordinary prison visit suddenly became something far more serious. And then came the moment nobody expected. The disguise began coming off. The truth was revealed. And everyone watching realized they had nearly witnessed one of the most shocking prison escapes in modern history. Investigators removed the disguise piece by piece. First the wig, then the glasses, then the mask. What stood beneath wasn't a teenage girl. It was Clauvino da Silva. The entire plan had failed. But many people were shocked by how convincing the disguise looked. For a brief moment, it had almost worked. And that raised an uncomfortable question. If security had been even slightly less alert, would he have succeeded? Attempted escape quickly became international news. Security experts studied the case, not because the escape succeeded, but because it came surprisingly close. The incident exposed several vulnerabilities. It showed how deception can sometimes bypass physical barriers, and it reminded authorities of an important lesson. Security isn't just about walls, it's about attention, observation, and recognizing when something doesn't feel right. Sometimes the smallest clue can prevent a major disaster. Once the disguise was exposed, prison officials immediately launched an investigation. They wanted answers. How had the disguise entered the prison? Who knew about the plan? And how close had Clauvino actually come to escaping? Investigators carefully examined the wig, glasses, clothing, and silicone mask. Every item became evidence. The failed escape attempt had transformed into a major security case, because while the plan had failed, it had revealed weaknesses that authorities could no longer ignore. I'll just often point out something fascinating about deception. Most successful disguises aren't perfect. They simply redirect attention. People tend to notice what they expect to see. If someone appears ordinary, our brains often fill in the missing details automatically. This is known as expectation bias. The disguise wasn't trying to fool everyone forever. It only needed to work long enough to pass a few critical moments. And that idea explains why security professionals train themselves to challenge assumptions. Because sometimes the biggest threat looks completely ordinary. When news of the disguise reached the public, the story spread rapidly. Television networks covered it. Newspapers reported it. Online audiences around the world were stunned. Many people couldn't believe what they were seeing. Others were amazed by the realism of the disguise. The case quickly became one of the most talked about prison escape attempts of the decade. Not because it succeeded, but because it came close enough to make people wonder, what if security hadn't noticed? Following the failed escape attempt, authorities tightened security measures. The incident became a lesson, not just for one prison, but for correctional facilities everywhere. The case demonstrated that even strong physical barriers can be challenged by creativity and deception. And it reinforced an important reality. Security is not a single wall. It's a system, a chain of observations, procedures, and human judgment. And every link matters. Later, people still remember this case, not because of violence, not because of a successful escape, but because it revealed something surprisingly human: the desire for freedom, the power of deception, and the importance of vigilance. The disguise was elaborate. The plan was bold, but in the end, a few small inconsistencies changed everything. Sometimes history turns on details so small that most people never notice them until it's too late. In the end, Clauvino da Silva didn't walk out of prison that day. The disguise was uncovered. The plan collapsed. And what could have become one of the most shocking prison escapes in modern history became one of the most bizarre failed escape attempts ever recorded. But the story leaves us with an interesting question. If you had been standing at that prison gate, would you have noticed something was wrong? Or would the disguise have fooled you too? Let me know your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoy unbelievable prison escapes, failed jailbreaks, famous fugitives, and true crime mysteries from around the world, make sure you subscribe to Insane Prison Escape Crime Cases. because the next story might be even more unbelievable than this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.